Alien girls were labeled unadoptable and sold for meat. He spent his last credits to buy them. The station was called Karin Drift, but everyone who had been there knew it by another name. They called it the Quiet Market. Ships came and went without music, without banners, without pride. Deals were made in low voices, and nothing sold there was ever meant to be remembered. The lights inside the main corridor were dim and yellow, old bulbs flickering as if they were tired of shining on the same ugly things. Metal floors were scratched by thousands of boots, claws, and wheels. The air smelled of oil, cold meat, and recycled breath. Guards stood at every corner, not to protect lives but to protect profits. Jonah Hale stepped off his ship and pulled his jacket tighter around him. He was human, and that alone earned him a few looks. Humans were still rare this far from the core systems. Some species respected them. Some feared them. Most thought of them as strange, emotional creatures who cared too much about things that did not benefit them. Jonah had not come to the station for trade. His cargo ship was empty except for a few personal items and a failing engine. He was running low on fuel, low on food, and very low on credits. Karin Drift was the last stop before a long stretch of dead space. He planned to refuel, rest for a few hours, and leave. That was the plan. As he walked through the corridor, holographic signs flickered to life on both sides. Biostock available, salvage labor, protein-grade organics. The words were clean and legal, carefully chosen to avoid older, uglier terms. Jonah tried not to look, but the sounds made it hard. Soft crying, whispers in languages he did not know, the clink of restraint cuffs. He told himself the same thing everyone did. It's legal. It's not your problem. You can't save everyone. He slowed when he reached one open bay. Inside, rows of cages were stacked against the wall. Some were empty, some were not. Different species sat inside them, most silent, some staring at nothing, some rocking back and forth. Each cage had a digital tag floating in front of it listing weight, condition, and classification. Jonah scanned the tags without meaning to. Labor grade, medical use, meat grade. He stopped walking. Near the back of the bay were smaller cages, clearly older models, rusted and too close together. Inside them were children. They were not human, but they were unmistakably children. Small bodies, large eyes, limbs pulled close in fear. There were 5 of them, all female by the station's records. Their skin was a soft pale blue, their hair thin and silver, hanging in tangled strands around their faces. Their eyes were dark and reflective, following every movement around them. Above their cages floated a single shared tag. Unadoptable, meat grade, and sentient classification confirmed. Jonah felt something twist hard in his chest. Non-sentient. He had seen that label before, used like a weapon. It meant no rights, no protection. No one asking questions. One of the girls noticed him staring. She was the smallest, sitting with her knees pulled to her chest. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw his face. Slowly, uncertainly, she raised one hand and pressed it against the bars. Jonah stepped closer without thinking. The girl's fingers trembled. Her mouth opened and a sound came out. It was not a word, but it was not a noise either. It was a soft, careful attempt at speech. Jonah swallowed. Non-sentient creatures did not try to speak. A sharp voice cut through the air. "Don't bother, human." Jonah turned. A station broker stood nearby, tall and thin, his species marked by segmented skin and metallic implants along his jaw. He wore a neutral uniform and a bored expression. "They're defective stock," the broker said. "Failed bonding tests, failed learning thresholds, waste of resources." Jonah looked back at the cages. "They're kids." The broker gave a clicking laugh. "They are biological units that resemble juveniles. Sentience was evaluated and rejected. It's all properly logged." "They reacted to my voice," Jonah said quietly. "She tried to speak." "Instinctual mimicry," the broker replied smoothly. "Common in livestock species, means nothing." Jonah clenched his jaw. What happens to them? The broker gestured down the corridor. Processing, protein conversion, very efficient. The smallest girl whimpered as if she understood more than anyone wanted to admit. Jonah felt heat rise behind his eyes. He thought of his empty ship, his dwindling credits. He thought of all the times he had walked away before, telling himself he had no choice. How much? He asked. The broker tilted his head. For what? For them. The broker stared at him for a long moment, then burst out laughing. You're serious? Jonah did not answer. They are priced as a batch, the broker said. Low quality, barely worth transport, but if you insist. He tapped his wrist console. A number appeared in the air. Jonah's heart dropped. That was everything. Fuel money, food, dock fees, emergency reserves. Every credit he had left in the universe. If you buy them, the broker added, amused, you will not be able to leave this station. Jonah looked at the girls again. 5 pairs of eyes watched him now. Fear, hope, confusion, something else too, trust, fragile and dangerous. He remembered his mother's voice from long ago saying, if you ever have the chance to do the right thing and it costs you, that's how you know it matters. Jonah activated his credit transfer. The broker's console chimed. The laughter faded from his face, replaced by surprise. Transaction complete, the system announced. For a moment the bay was silent. Then the cages unlocked. The doors slid open with a hiss. The girls did not move at first. They had learned that open doors often led to worse things. Jonah crouched down slowly, lowering himself to their level. You're safe, he said, keeping his voice gentle. I won't hurt you. The smallest girl crawled forward. She stopped inches from him, lifted her hand again and touched his sleeve. Her fingers were warm. You stay, she whispered, the words broken but real. Jonah's breath caught. Yeah, he said, I'm staying. Behind him, voices rose in mockery. Traders laughed. Guards shook their heads. Someone called him an idiot. Someone else said he'd be dead within a week. Jonah didn't turn around. He gathered the girls together, wrapping his jacket around the smallest one. They clung to him like they were afraid the ground might disappear. As he led them out of the bay, alarms did not sound. No laws were broken. Everything was perfectly legal. That was the worst part. Outside, the station felt colder. Jonah checked his wrist console. His account balance read 0. His ship's fuel gauge blinked red in his mind. He had no plan, no backup, no way forward that made sense. But when he looked down at the girls walking beside him, their small hands gripping his fingers, he knew one thing with perfect clarity. For the first time in a long while, he had not looked away. And somewhere deep inside Karen Drift, something ancient and ugly had just lost its easiest meal. Jonah's ship was small, old and tired, much like its owner. The hull carried scratches from years of careful flying through dangerous places, and the engine made a low, unhappy hum that never fully went away. As the boarding ramp closed behind them, the sounds of Karen Drift faded into a dull vibration. The 5 girls stood just inside the cargo bay, frozen. The space was empty except for a few storage crates and a narrow passage leading toward the cockpit. The ship lights were soft and white, nothing like the harsh yellow glow of the market. Still, the girls did not relax. Freedom felt unfamiliar. Silence felt dangerous. Jonah set his hands where they could see them and slowly sat on the deck. This is my ship, he said. It's not much, but it's safe. No cages here. They watched him closely. The tallest girl tilted her head, studying him as if she were trying to solve a problem. Another held tightly to the smallest one, shielding her with her body. They moved together, like they had learned that staying close was the only way to survive. Jonah reached into a crate and pulled out a folded thermal blanket. He placed it on the floor between them and slid it closer, then leaned back. You don't have to come closer, he said. I won't force you. Several long seconds passed. The ship's engine ticked as it cooled. Finally, the smallest girl took a step forward. She touched the blanket, then wrapped it around her shoulders. Her breathing slowed just a little. That seemed to break something inside the others. One by one, they moved closer, sitting on the deck across from Jonah. None of them smiled, but the fear in their eyes softened into cautious curiosity. Jonah realized then that they were watching his face, not his hands. He kept his expression calm, even when panic pressed hard against his ribs. He had saved them, yes, but now what? He had no credits, no fuel, and 5 lives depending on him. "I'm Jonah," he said. "That's my name." The tallest girl tapped her own chest. "Ira," she said slowly, the word practiced but unsure. Another girl spoke next, her voice rough like she did not use it often. "Selly." The others followed, offering names that sounded like memories pulled from deep places. Jonah repeated each one carefully, making sure he said them right. Each time he did, their posture changed just a little. Names mattered. They always had. Hours passed quietly. Jonah shared what little food he had left, nutrient bars and water packs. He watched closely for signs of fear or discomfort, but the girls ate slowly, carefully, like people who had learned that food could be taken away at any moment. When the last wrapper was folded and set aside, Jonah leaned against a crate and closed his eyes. He allowed himself one long breath. That was when the ship's proximity alarm chimed. Jonah's eyes snapped open. He moved quickly but quietly toward the cockpit display. 3 figures were approaching the ship from the dock. Station security colors, but not official patrol markings. "Stay here," Jonah whispered, though he knew they might not understand. "Don't make noise." He stepped into the airlock just as the external hatch began to cycle. The door slid open. 2 armed guards stood there with a broker behind them. Jonah recognized him immediately. Same segmented skin, same bored eyes, no laughter this time. "You shouldn't have left the bay," the broker said. "There was a mistake in processing." Jonah folded his arms. Transaction was complete. "Yes," the broker replied smoothly, "but an audit flagged irregularities. Those units may need to be reassessed." Jonah shook his head. "They're not going back." The guards shifted, hands tightening on their weapons. The broker leaned closer. "You don't understand how this works, human. You have no leverage, no credits, no protection." Jonah smiled faintly. "I have something better," the broker frowned. "And what is that?" Jonah tapped his wrist console. "A full recording of the sale. Visuals, audio, classification data, everything." The broker froze. "I uploaded it to an open channel," Jonah continued. "Public access. Human relay networks, it's already out there." That was a lie, mostly. The upload was queued, not sent, but the broker didn't know that. "You'd expose a legal market," the broker hissed. "I'd expose children being sold as food," Jonah said. "Call it whatever you want." The guards hesitated. They were not paid enough for this kind of trouble. The broker's jaw clicked as he recalculated. "Get off my ship," Jonah said calmly, "or I finish the upload." After a long moment, the broker gestured sharply. The guards stepped back. The hatch closed. Jonah sagged against the wall, his legs shaking. He waited until the footsteps faded before he returned to the cargo bay. The girls were standing together near the far wall. Ira stepped forward. "They come back?" she asked. "Not today," Jonah said. She studied his face again, then nodded once. Trust was forming, slow and careful. Jonah moved to the cockpit and stared at the navigation display. The fuel gauge blinked red. He could not leave the station, not yet. A plan formed, rough and dangerous. He opened a channel to the station's public net and began transmitting small pieces of information. Not accusations, just data, sale logs, classification inconsistencies. Quiet questions, then he waited. It did not take long. A human freighter responded first, then another, then a private research vessel. Questions flooded the channel, human voices sharp and focused. "What do you mean meat-grade juveniles?" "Send confirmation." "Who authorized this?" Jonah sent everything he had. Behind him, the girls watched the screens light up with unfamiliar symbols and colors. They did not understand the words, but they felt the change in the air. Something was happening, something big. Station alarms began to sound, not loud enough for evacuation but sharp enough to signal trouble. Guards moved through the corridors outside. Jonah shut down non-essential systems and dimmed the lights. "We might have to leave fast," he said gently. "If I tell you to run, you run to the back of the ship and stay low." Selly shook her head. "We stay." Jonah met her eyes. "Okay, we stay together." Hours later, a human patrol ship arrived. Then another. The station's calm, silent rhythm broke under the weight of attention. Jonah's ship shook as docking clamps released unexpectedly. Someone was trying to force him out. "No," Jonah muttered, throwing himself into the pilot's seat. He rerouted power manually, ignoring warning lights as the engine protested. The ship lurched forward, scraping the dock as it pulled free. Alarms screamed. Jonah pushed the throttle just enough. The girls screamed too, clutching each other as gravity shifted. "Hold on," Jonah shouted. The ship burst free of Karen Drift's outer ring, trailing sparks and smoke. Jonah didn't stop until the station was a distant light behind them. Only then did he cut the engines. Silence fell again. Jonah slumped forward, exhausted. He had no idea where they would go next. No idea how he would feed them. No idea how long the engine would last. But when he turned around, he saw the girls smiling for the first time. Small smiles. Real ones. Ira stepped forward and placed her hand on his shoulder. "You came back," she said simply. Jonah swallowed hard. "Yeah," he replied. "I always will." The ship drifted in quiet space, engines resting, lights low. Jonah let the systems cool while he checked damage reports scrolling across the main screen. The news was not good, but it was not fatal either. A cracked fuel line, heat stress in the engine core, life support running below comfort levels but still safe. They were alive. That mattered more than anything. Behind him, the girls sat together on the deck, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars through the small side window. None of them had ever seen open space without bars or guards before. The stars seemed unreal to them, like holes punched into a dark wall. Jonah stood and moved toward the storage lockers. He found a small med kit and began scanning them one by one, keeping his touch gentle and slow. There were old bruises, healed scars, and signs of long hunger. He did not comment on any of it. He just treated what he could. When he finished, he sat back against the wall. Exhaustion settled into his bones. "We're safe for now," he said, "but I need to know more about you, about your people." Ira exchanged looks with the others. She hesitated, then nodded. "We remember," she said. "They wanted us not to." That caught Jonah's attention. "Who?" "The teachers," Selly said quietly. "Before the cages." The girls spoke slowly, helping each other with words. Jonah listened without interrupting. They explained that their species had once lived on a warm ocean world, rich and calm. They were not strong in the way some species were. They did not build warships or conquer systems. Instead, they shared knowledge through something they called joining. A way of thinking together, feeling together, learning without force. When invaders came long ago, the girls, people did not fight back the way the galaxy expected. They tried to talk, to connect. It was called weakness. Their world was taken. Records were changed. Their species was labeled emotionally fragile, low intelligence dependent. Children were removed for study. Adoption programs followed. Then the programs failed. "What failed?" Jonah asked. "They could not control us," Ira said. "We learn when we trust, not when we fear." Jonah closed his eyes for a moment. Everything about the market suddenly made sense. "Why were you marked unadoptable?" he asked. Selly's voice was barely a whisper. "Because we cried when others cried. Because we remembered names. Because we did not forget." Jonah felt a slow burn of anger spread through his chest. Not the sharp kind, the dangerous, steady kind. As the girls spoke, something strange began to happen. Jonah noticed that when one girl remembered something painful, the others reacted at the same time. Their breathing synced. Their eyes reflected the same emotion. It was subtle, but it was real. You share feelings, Jonah said. Ira nodded. When we are safe. The ship's lights flickered softly. Jonah checked the system logs, then froze. The girls' heart rates were syncing with each other and with him. That's not possible, he muttered. But it was happening, slowly, carefully, as if something inside them was reaching out not to control but to understand. Jonah didn't pull away. Instead, he focused on calm thoughts, on safety, on steady breathing. He imagined warmth and shelter and food. The girls relaxed visibly. Hours later, Jonah received a tight beam message, human signal, encrypted. Civilian ship Hail 7, this is human patrol vessel Resolute. We received your data package. Do you require assistance? Jonah exhaled in relief. Yes, he replied. But it's complicated. They arranged a rendezvous near a dead moon far from trade lanes. When the patrol ship appeared, massive and steady, the girls pressed close to Jonah. He rested a hand on Ira's shoulder. You're not in trouble, he told them. They're here to help. The Resolute's captain was a woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She listened as Jonah explained everything. She watched the girls carefully, noting their reactions, their awareness, their attention to language. They're clearly sentient, the captain said flatly. This classification is a lie. She ordered medical scans and cultural specialists. The girls cooperated, but only when Jonah stayed nearby. When he left the room briefly, their stress levels spiked instantly. They're bonded to you, a human scientist said quietly. Not in a dependency way, in a trust anchor way. What does that mean? Jonah asked. It means, the scientist replied, that you treated them like people when the galaxy didn't. That changes brain development. For their species, it might unlock things we don't understand yet. The data they collected was undeniable. Complex language processing, emotional reasoning beyond human baseline, neural structures designed for shared cognition. The captain sent the report straight to multiple councils and public channels. This time, it could not be buried. But the galaxy did not react with shame. It reacted with resistance. Counterclaims appeared almost immediately. Old experts questioned the results. Corporations warned of economic disruption. Station officials called the tests flawed. One message stood out. Transfer the specimens to authorized custody. Jonah read it twice. His jaw tightened. No, he said simply. The Resolute prepared to escort Jonah and the girls to a protected human outpost. As they traveled, more human ships joined them. Not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to. Word spread fast among humans. Children sold as food, labeled unadoptable. One man spent everything to save them. That story mattered. On the third day of travel, something changed. The girls were sitting together, hands linked, eyes closed. Jonah felt it before the alarm sounded. A pressure in his mind, gentle but deep. Ira, he said. She opened her eyes. They glowed faintly, not with light but with clarity. We can speak now, she said, together. The ship systems began correcting themselves. Power flow stabilized. Navigation errors vanished. The girls were not touching the controls, but the ship responded as if guided by thought. The human technicians stared in disbelief. They're interfacing emotionally, one whispered, with technology. The girls explained that their people had always worked this way. Machines were not commanded, they were understood. Fear had shut that ability down, trust brought it back. By the time they reached the outpost, the girls were laughing. Real laughter, light and surprised, like they had just remembered something beautiful. Jonah watched them and felt something loosen inside him. He had saved them, but they had given him something too. Proof that the galaxy had been wrong. Proof that kindness could wake sleeping stars. Far away on Karen Drift, records were quietly edited, but it was too late. Humans were watching now. And humans did not forget. The human outpost was built into the side of a gray, airless moon, hidden from main routes and protected by layers of quiet defenses. From the outside, it looked small and unimportant. From the inside, it was alive with movement, voices, and purpose. Jonah watched through the wide observation window as the girls stepped into the habitat ring for the first time. Gravity was gentle here, the lights warm and steady. Real plants grew along the walls, their green leaves reaching toward artificial sunlight. The girls froze, stunned by the colors. Sally reached out and touched a leaf. When it moved under her fingers, she laughed softly, then covered her mouth as if afraid she had done something wrong. "You can laugh," Jonah said. "It's allowed." She looked at him uncertain, then laughed again, louder this time. The sound echoed down the corridor. Several humans nearby stopped what they were doing and smiled. Within hours, news of the girls spread through the outpost, not as rumors but as data, scans, videos, audio recordings of their speech and shared cognition. Human scientists worked carefully, respectfully, always explaining before touching or testing. No restraints, no force. The girls noticed everything. "They ask first," Ira said to Jonah later. "That matters." "It should," Jonah replied. As days passed, the girls grew stronger. Better food and rest brought color back to their skin. Their shared ability became clearer. When one learned a word, the others picked it up instantly. When one felt fear, the rest calmed her without speaking. Human researchers documented everything and sent the information outward, uncensored and public. This time, it was not one man's recording. It was thousands of eyes and voices. The response from the wider galaxy was not kind. Official statements arrived from trade coalitions and adoption authorities. They used careful language, talking about misinterpretation and isolated incidents. Some accused humans of emotional bias. Others warned that recognizing the girl's species as sentient would disrupt markets and labor systems. Jonah watched these messages scroll across the screen, his hands clenched. "They're afraid," Captain Reyes said beside him. "Not of the truth, of what comes after." "What comes after?" Jonah asked. Reyes looked at the girls playing quietly with a human child in the common area. "Responsibility." Humans responded the way they always did when faced with injustice that could no longer be ignored, not with immediate war but with pressure. Human trade guilds froze contracts with stations linked to meat grade classifications. Insurance companies raised rates. Transport captains refused to dock at suspect markets. Lawyers and data analysts pulled apart decades of records, finding lies stacked on lies. All of it was legal, all of it was devastating. On Karen Drift, brokers panicked. Processing lines shut down. Guards walked away from posts. The quiet market grew louder by the day. Then came the threats. Encrypted messages reached the outpost, demanding the return of the girls. Some offered credits, some offered favors, some promised consequences. Jonah deleted them all. One night, the outpost's long-range sensors detected ships dropping out of jump space nearby. Not human, not friendly. Defense alarms sounded softly, controlled and calm. Human patrol vessels moved into position, not aggressive but firm. The girls felt it immediately. Jonah found them sitting together, hands linked, eyes closed. "They're angry," Sally said. "The ones who sold us." "They can't take you," Jonah said. "Not anymore." Ira looked up at him. "We are not afraid." That was new. The standoff never became a battle. The approaching ship stopped just outside engagement range. Messages were exchanged, warnings given, evidence cited. Finally, the ships turned away. The galaxy had learned something important that day. Humans would not fire first, but they would not step aside. Weeks later, a formal session of the Galactic Council was called. For the first time in many cycles, humans did not sit quietly at the edge. They brought data, witnesses, and living proof. Jonah was asked to speak. He hated public attention, but he stood anyway. "I didn't do anything special," he said simply. "I saw children in cages and I bought them, that's it." The chamber was silent. "They were labeled unadoptable," Jonah continued. "But no one asked if the system was broken. They were called non-sentient, but no one listened when they tried to speak." He gestured to the girls beside him. They stood straight, calm, unafraid. "You don't get to decide who is a person based on convenience," Jonah said, "and you don't get to sell the ones who don't fit." The girls stepped forward together. "We are here," Ira said clearly, her voice carried across the chamber. "We learned through trust, you taught us fear." The council could not ignore them. Too many recordings, too many witnesses, too many humans watching. After long hours of debate, classifications were suspended pending full review. Markets were ordered closed, adoption systems frozen. It was not justice yet, but it was the beginning. Back at the outpost, life settled into a new rhythm. The girls began formal education, learning human languages and galactic history. Humans learned from them too, studying shared cognition and emotional intelligence. Jonah was offered rewards, credits, a newer ship, permanent residence. He refused most of it. "Use it to find the others," he said. "There are more like them." So humans did. Rescue operations spread quietly at first, then openly. Ships diverted, records examined, doors opened. Across multiple systems, beings once labeled unadoptable were found to be anything but. Families formed where cages had once stood. Jonah often watched the girls at night, sitting beneath the artificial stars of the habitat dome. They talked about the future now, about rebuilding what was lost, about helping others the way they had been helped. "You didn't save just us," Selly told him once. "You reminded us who we were." Jonah shook his head. "You reminded the galaxy." Far away, old powers took note. Some were angry, some were afraid. But none could deny the truth any longer. Humanity had drawn a line, not with weapons but with compassion backed by action. And the galaxy was changing, whether it wanted to or not. Years passed, but the story never faded. It began as a rumor in distant systems, then a lesson in academies, then a quiet truth that everyone knew. The quiet market was no longer quiet. It no longer existed at all. Karen Drift was sealed, its records opened, its brokers scattered or judged by courts that finally chose to look. Jonah Hale did not stay at the center of it. After the council hearings and the rescue waves, he returned to space. Not the lonely drifting he once knew, but a slower, purposeful travel. His ship was repaired, not replaced. Humans had offered him a new model, faster and stronger, but he refused. "This one remembers," he had said simply. The girls did not leave him either. They grew, not just in size, but in confidence. Their species was officially recognized, their old name restored after centuries of erasure. Embassies were formed. Survivors were found. Children once scattered across systems were brought together again. But the 5 girls who had walked out of cages with Jonah became something different. They chose learning first. Human schools welcomed them, adjusting lessons, listening instead of forcing. Teachers learned quickly that teaching one meant teaching all 5. Knowledge passed between them like breath. Math, language, history, engineering, nothing stayed locked in one mind for long. They also chose to remember. They visited stations where markets once stood. They spoke to survivors. They listened to anger and grief without turning away. They did not demand forgiveness. They offered understanding. That frightened many more than rage ever could. Jonah watched from the edges as they became leaders without trying to be. People listened when they spoke, not because of power, but because of clarity. They did not shout. They did not threaten. They simply told the truth and waited, and humans stood behind them. Human trade did not return to systems that rebuilt markets under new names. Human ships refused to carry biological goods without proof of consent. Human data networks tracked classification abuses and made them public within hours. Other species noticed. Some called humans dangerous. Some called them naive. Some quietly changed their laws before humans noticed them too closely. Jonah lived most days simply. He maintained his ship, helped where he could, and stayed available when the girls needed grounding. He was not their leader. He never claimed to be their guardian. But when things grew heavy, they still sat near him, close enough to feel steady. One evening, under a dome of artificial stars, Ira asked him a question she had carried for a long time. "Why us?" she said. "You did not know who we were." Jonah thought for a long moment before answering. "I didn't need to," he said. "You were scared. That was enough." She nodded slowly, absorbing the answer, sharing it with the others without words. The galaxy continued to change, but not all at once. Some old powers resisted until they broke under pressure. Some adapted. Some vanished quietly. Then came the day the council invited Jonah again. This time they offered him a seat. He declined. "I don't belong there," he said. "I belong where things still go wrong." Instead, he proposed something else. A civilian network, independent ships, mixed crews. A way to watch the forgotten places without waiting for permission. Humans supported it immediately. Others joined later. The girls helped design it, not as commanders but as guides. They understood trauma. They knew how fear hid itself. Their shared minds saw patterns others missed. Rescue became prevention. Years later, a new generation grew up hearing the story in pieces, not as legend but as example. They learned that the galaxy once sold children and called it law. They learned that one human with empty pockets had said no. Jonah aged quietly. His hair grayed. His movements slowed. The girls, now adults, still called him by name, never by title. On a calm day far from busy lanes, Jonah sat in the cockpit of his ship, watching a sunrise spill across a blue planet. The girls stood behind him, their presence warm and familiar. "We will not lose this again," Sally said softly. "No," Jonah agreed. "You won't." When the time finally came, it was gentle. Jonah passed away aboard his ship, surrounded by stars and people who loved him. No alarms, no fear, just quiet. The galaxy noticed, but there were no statues. Instead, new rules appeared in trade charters. New questions were added to adoption systems. New words replaced old labels. Unadoptable was erased. Years later still, the five stood together at a rebuilt port where children laughed openly. Ships came and went without cages. Markets sold food, not lives. A young human asked them once, "Was it really that bad before?" Ira looked at the sky, then back at the child. "Yes," she said, "but someone chose to care." The child nodded as if that made perfect sense, and that was how the galaxy remembered humanity, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as the ones who looked at a broken system, saw children inside it, and spent everything to make it stop.